So we're going to be working on the wings right now, and what it looks like is we're going to be putting a servo in there. So we are going to be putting our servo in there and cutting a slot through the skin over here so that we can have a direct point to the flaperon here and where we're going to mount the horn. But first, the servo we're going to be using for this are these Overkill. This is all I had, FreeSky 6505H servos. So that's what I'm going to be using on the flaperons. I think these are Overkill, but well, it's all I had, so that's what I'm going to put in there. So I guess I'll start by cutting open this, removing this center brace here, and then opening this up so that the servo can fit, because right now doesn't look like it fits very well. So back on the wing here, the first thing we're gonna do, or maybe we already did, is trim that center block off. And then what I'm gonna do is, instead of mounting a external servo, so ideally we're supposed to have a servo stick out here and have a linkage going to the horn that's sitting outside. I think I'm gonna opt for an internal linkage. That way there's going to be nothing showing up outside on the top. So the manual calls for 20 millimeters of travel up and down, and I guess I measured it at the tip, so right here. Obviously it's going to be more measured on the inboard side, but I'm going to try and get as much as possible, at least for the linkage, and then I can use the servo travel to trim it down. So what I'd like to do is just make sure that everything moves as expected. That looks like pretty much good amount of travel. We'll see how much that is. Opened up a wing here. I've also opened up that hole, and if you can notice, there's also a little bit of a notch in here, and that's because when the servo goes in, well, you need a place to allow for that wire to go in, otherwise the servo just doesn't go in because it's a tight fit. But the good thing here is I also opened up the second area right here, so this was all closed up, and the reason for that is because I want the servo connections and my light connections to all come through a central point in the wing. And the thing that is cool about this is that how Skymaster built this is that there's a channel there, and you can see when I shine the light, you see it coming through this hole. It's pretty much open, so that goes all the way, that channel goes all the way to the bottom of the wing right there. You can see the end of the wing. So this is great. It should be pretty easy to get all of our wiring for the lights and the servo wire routed from in here and out to a connector that's going to sit in this area, and then obviously we'll mount the mating connector back on the fuselage. Okay, so that looks to be at least about 20, a little bit more than 20 millimeters on the trailing edge of the aileron. So that should be plenty of throw. From what I remember from my first F-16, you don't need that much aileron. Opened up the hole here, and the reason for that was whatever had been cut out was not enough to fit my servo. So we're just going to open it up a little bit more so we can get our servo, and since there's not much room in the end here, we're going to probably open it more this way. We've expanded our hole, you can see that, and we've got our servo in there, and here we're using the BLS 6505H again. very high torquey servo. And so now that we have this, here's my plan. We're gonna use a tiny servo horn like that. We're gonna stick in there, and the reason I oriented the servo this way is because if you look at the profile of the wing, it's thinner here and wider here, and I want to have an internal linkage, so I want to have the spline on the wider side. That gives me the best chance of putting a horn like that and having the linkage have the maximum height from the spline out. And now when we come to the flaperon surface itself, so it's hinged right here, and so which means that the rotating point of the surface is right around here. So to get the maximum leverage, we want to have our internal horn mounted somewhere along this line up here, and we want the servo where the linkage will attach to when this is in to be probably lined up as best as possible with the center, or maybe a little bit further in. That way, if the servo attachment point is up here, you pull, you have the leverage of the distance between the rotation point and where it's hinged at, and that allows you to move the servo. We have created our harness. So that's going from here to here. I'm going to change the connector later because I still have the lights to do that go on the wingtips. Also, forgot to mention this, but you can see the hole, and there's that caveat out there for the servo wire to fit through. So we're going to go mount this servo, which is this guy, and proceed with how the linkage is going to be wired. Mounted for internal linkage, and you can see the clevis end out here. So what I'm gonna do is make sure I line that up correctly. And the servo horn is gonna go up here as far possible away from that hinge on this flat surface that we have right here. So looking in there, it looks pretty hollow. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to get some structure into there so that the aileron horn is supported. So I could either figure that out or also use this structure here to glue the horn. We'll figure that out, but probably we'll get some wood in there and then a whole bunch of epoxy to make sure that that horn is really glued to the flaperon surface. The horn that we're gonna use, and basically cut this out of some fiberglass plate that I had sitting. So I've roughed down the surface here, and basically what's going to happen is this is going to sit in the surface sort of like this, and this area here is going to be on that curved flap that the flaperon has that goes under the wing. So I'll glue that and show you what that looks like. To increase the structure, we can see that it's pretty much hollow in there. What I'm gonna do is I have this piece of wood, and I'm gonna stick it all the way in there and glue it to the side, and then that way, sort of like that, and basically it'll sit right here all the way along, and that way once that's glued we have a place to put epoxy and then bind the surface here to that piece of wood, and then bind the horn that I'm gonna hang in here to that. So that'll provide some support needed in there. So in there we can see that piece of wood that we've CA'd there, and so we're gonna drop a bunch of epoxy right in there, and now that epoxy has a pocket to sit in, but also has surfaces to use to hang on to. So I feel much better about the structure in there now and the internal linkage process. So we'll get that done and we'll show you what that looks like. What I'm thinking of is, here's the horn, and that's just gonna go in there sort of like that, and we want it to sit, let's see, we want this surface right here to sit just below that. I still gotta push it in further, but you get the idea. Epoxied with E20NS epoxy right here. So we're gonna let it cure. That takes, I think, 24 hours. Has a 20-minute work life. We're gonna let that cure, and and we'll show what the results are. Our hinge was secured, and what I'm showing here is just how I secure this. There's a small piece of fuel tubing I just cut from that, and with that I can actually get something that'll hold pressure against the clever so it doesn't open. So all that's left is to mount that end onto the servo with Loctite and then check out the whole mechanism. So servo installation's done. So the flaperon now moves pretty good, and all is internal. This is the bottom side of the wing, nothing's exposed, and you can see this is really tight. There's no play in the control surface anywhere, so I'm happy with that. To mention I didn't show on camera is that this screw here that secures the horn to the servo arm, on the back side of that there is a lock nut, so just to make sure that the screw never comes out. Even though I did tap the red aluminum horn here, and what I wanted to show here is how I secured the backside. So a lock nut won't quite fit in here, it's a bit too big, but a regular nut will. So what I'll do is I will use some Loctite. Let's see if we can get that to focus. Here we go. I'm gonna use some Loctite, some blue Loctite. And then we're gonna screw this in place, just like that. There we go. So we can see what that looks like on the back side. And I put Loctite through this, which is also threaded, and then a nut in the back. And now I'm very confident that that's not gonna go anywhere. So alright, so now we're gonna move our attention to the tip of the wing. So that's right here. And as you can see, there's really nothing done for you, but the idea is you have your rails and you have your missile. And the way this is designed, if you look at the rails, or when I looked at the rails, I see there's a single hole right here. The other one is way back here. I think this is just for how they hang it when painting it. But the rail has two holes. So it looks like what needs to happen is the front hole here lines up with this guy. And you put a longer screw in there, and that'll go through the missile, through the rail, through that hole, and into the fuselage. And on the back there's not a hole here, so I guess that's intended to be held. The missile just gets held with one screw to the rail, but the rail gets held to the fuselage with two screws. So what I'm debating doing, and I think what I'll do is, so I can see here that there's material inside the hole there, but it feels pretty hollow back here where the second hole is. What I would like to do is just have this so that both are going to use long screws that go from here through the missile rail and into the fuselage. I think it'll just be easier to maintain. And initially I was going to do like a channel for the balsa to, and then put epoxy in, and I realized that there's an even easier way, which is that if I just get many strips of balsa, like cut them like maybe a millimeter thick, and then just shove many strips in there into that hole, the length of the diameter of the tube, so that I get wood going from this end all the way to the bottom here, and just let CA wick through them. That's actually going to create a very solid piece of wood. So that's what I did here. I don't know why this is not focusing. There we go. And then just trim that off, and that's like nice and hard. So I'm going to re-drill through that, and that should give me a nice surface to put my screws through. Here's the result. I have taken out the tape, and this is the side that has the wood, and as I drilled I actually kept wicking CA in there to make sure that that balsa was nice and soaked. And here's the other side, so I just need to widen that to match this guy, and then widen the front here, probably countersink it, whatever I need to do to get as close as possible to this guy here, and then we're going to be ready to mount this. So here's the final result. You can see the hole there, and the white is just CA, and the goal is to get the screw in there, and that's going to drop in, and it's going to sit in the cavity just like that. I might countersink it a little more so that it sits better, and then we'll just touch that up with black paint, and we're gonna go mount this on the wing. Here is the assembly, so we can see the screws go in through the missiles here and come out the rails, and we're gonna get the spacing so that we can mount it on the wing. The other thing that's left is, if you choose to do it this way, then you will need M3. At least what I used was, let's see, these are M3 by 50 millimeter screws. The way I'm choosing to mount this is the rails, the two screws will go into right here and right there, and that is about 50 millimeters. Let's see, let's take that measurement again. Yeah, so that's about 50 millimeters from the end of the wing. So from this point, 50 millimeters in. And then the spacing between that and that screw is about 100 millimeters. So we're gonna use to drill the hole. So this is a M3 by 0.5 drill and tap. So it'll drill and tap the hole. Oh, this is not focusing. And that way we will get to drill the hole right there and tap it, and that's where M3 screws will go. We'll obviously strengthen that with CA, and then we'll screw our missile and rail in. Here are holes. I'm not sure if we can see the threads, but they've been drilled and tapped. And they line up perfectly with, zoom out here so we can see, they line up perfectly with our mounting screws. So what's left obviously is to cut the access hole for the wire, and that goes right in there, and run the wire right through. Okay, there we go. So I cut that a little bit too low, so I'm just putting some CA to strengthen that, but that access hole is done. So just dab some CA in these threads. Just like that. Hit it with some accelerator. And hopefully those threads are now ready. Perfect. Looks like a perfect fit. Let's zoom back out. Let me just screw these guys in. There we have it. Oh yeah, that's a nice solid fit. It's not going anywhere. And we're done with, this is just accelerator which we can clean off, but we're done. Our mounting is done. The wing, I believe, is done. So we have our servo installed. We have our connector. So this has the servo routed around, and basically there's a channel that comes out all the way that way, routed out. And then the wing tip, we have our locking connector right there. So we're gonna plug everything in, stash it in there. The wing's done. We're on the jet and we've just finished our wing. So what's left here is mounting the opposite, or the mating connector for the aileron, and that's gonna go somewhere in here. Mating connector. So that's what's gonna go and get mated into here. And so what I did is I just traced out the outline of that guy onto some fiberglass that I had and made that mount. And basically this is gonna go in through here. sort of like that, and pushed all the way in. So you can do this one-handed. There we go. And that is a perfect connector, and that's gonna get mounted in the wing area sort of like that. Okay, so we've marked our spot. We're gonna go ahead and drill that and get that connector added in place. There we go. I think that'll do nicely. We'll clean up the rest of the Sharpie mark with a isopropyl, and we'll mount that guy. Yeah, so that all works out. Looks like I have enough clearance, so if I mount that on the inside, glue it to the surface, it'll make for a really good connection point. There is the inside of the jet, and we've epoxied the back of our connector, and on the front that's what it looks like. So we're gonna let that cure, and pretty much we have our wing done. Here is the final product. So we have our wing, we have our connector, and everything works really well. We're gonna just assemble this. Perfect fit. Wing's done. Next thing is to repeat that on the other side and worry about the wiring.